In this video, I would like to conduct an analysis to understand the answer to this question. How similar are the spelling of Gaulish and Latin words? For example, if I take the English word apple, we may translate this into Gaulish as abalo, and into Latin, we may translate it as malum. If we say how similar are the spellings of these words, we can understand that they may not be very similar. However, I want to understand how similar the spellings are for several hundred words that are available in Gaulish. Note that in the title here I have used the word modern, as it is important to remember that the spelling of words may have changed over time. The accepted spelling that we see today may be one of only several spellings that were traditionally used. This is especially the case for the Gaulish language, where many of the historical inscriptions that have been found were actually written in ancient Greek, and different people may translate these inscriptions into a form of Gaulish that utilizes the Latin alphabet in slightly different ways. We may use a method called the Damerau-Levenshtein Distance to check for similarity in spelling between two words. This video will explain how Damerau-Levenshtein Distance works, and this video will include some statistical analysis to make a conclusion. To conduct this analysis, we of course need a set of Gaulish words. I will be utilizing a set of 237 Gaulish words, or short phrases, for this analysis. Reconstructed Gaulish words, such as from the modern Gaulish movement, which has cropped up in the last few years, will not be utilized. I will only be looking at words which were traditionally actually spoken in ancient Gaul. Note that the sources for these 237 words have been provided at the end of the video. The spelling used in these sources will be used as the spelling for these 237 Gaulish words in this analysis. Note that Latin words were obtained using Google Translate, and I'll explain how this was done later in the video. Before I go any further, I would like to retouch on the situation I previously presented here. Some viewers may raise the concern that I have used an incorrect translation. It is potentially fair to suggest that maybe I should have used the Latin translations of ponum or popula instead. This may be correct. I do not speak Latin, and this is why I will be using a more flexible method for comparison. A major problem with the available list of Gaulish words is that contextual information for many of the Gaulish words is not available or is not clear. For example, is the Gaulish word art, which can be translated to bear in English, does it refer to the animal, or does it refer to the action of possessing an object and intending to do something with it? It is not always clear in the provided sources. There will be more on this at the end of the video. In order to try and get around this, I will try and establish the best case Damerau-Levenshtein distance for each Gaulish word. So in other words, I want to find this distance between the Gaulish word and any of its available Latin translations. I will now briefly touch on how the Latin words are obtained. Let us take a situation where we use Google Translate and translate the English word apple to Latin. This provides a total of 4 possible available translations. In this analysis, we will compare apple to each of these available translations and take the best case. Let's now spend some time to understand how the Damerau-Levenshtein distance is calculated and will apply in this analysis. When calculating the Damerau-Levenshtein distance, there are several actions that may be taken. An insertion allows you to add a letter somewhere to an existing set of letters, or a word. A deletion allows you to remove a letter somewhere from an existing set of letters, or a word. A substitution allows you to take a given character, such as C in this example, and change it to another letter, D in this case, making the word cart into dart. A transposition allows you to exchange 2 adjacent letters. Now, it is important to note that an edit doesn't have to result in a real word. Most edits within the Damerau-Levenshtein distance method are simply steps that you take towards making the correct resulting word. Let's now look at an example of how to apply the Damerau-Levenshtein distance. Let's take the English word broad. This translates to laetano in Gaulish and lato in Latin. The Damerau-Levenshtein distance between laetano and lata is 3. Let's check the process of how this is found. First, the letter O is deleted from the Gaulish word. Next, the letter N is also deleted. Last, the letter A is substituted with the letter I. We then come up with the result, which is the Latin word lata, which is what we want. Let's now consider a situation of how we will actually use the Damerau-Levenshtein method within this exact example. Previously, when showing you how I use Google Translate, I showed you the example of how the English word apple would translate into 4 different possible words in Latin. These were malum, pomum, pupilla, and popula. We will see here that the word malum is repeated twice because it is shown twice within Google Translate. Now, in order to find the best Damerau-Levenshtein distance, I will take the Gaulish word abalo and compare it to the Latin translation of apple in each case. For example, if we take abalo and malum, we find that there is a Damerau-Levenshtein distance of 5. Now, in order to find the best case Damerau-Levenshtein distance, I will pick the lowest one that is available out of these numbers, which in this case is 5. Let's consider another situation. When I take the English word beer and use Google Translate to find all of the Latin translations, we find 4 available translations. If we apply the Damerau-Levenshtein distance between the Gaulish word cervesia and each of the Latin translations that are available, we find that there are some very different available numbers for the Damerau-Levenshtein distance, which are 2, 1, 6, and 5. In this case, we would pick the number 1 as the best available Damerau-Levenshtein distance because this would suggest this is the closest available translation. Let us now observe what happens when we actually apply this process to each of the 237 available Gaulish words. What we find is results that look like this. We find that the mean Damerau-Levenshtein distance is 3.87, with a large standard deviation of 2.92. The median is 4. Now, as we look at this graph that is presented on this slide, we see some numbers that are very large. We see a Damerau-Levenshtein distance of 14, 18, and even above 20. This is potentially an issue because this may sway our calculations away from what would be a reasonable result. If we actually do some basic mathematics, we will find that these numbers here are outliers. And as a result, I will continue and exclude the words which result in these Damerau-Levenshtein distances from future analysis. I will now show which words these are to enable full clarity. These are the words which have been removed because they are outliers. Each of these words has a Damerau-Levenshtein distance of above 10. Let us actually consider why the Damerau-Levenshtein distance is so large between some of these Gaulish words and their Latin translations. The issue is that in the sources that I have available, when the Gaulish word is translated into English, it actually comes out as a long set of words or a short sentence. For example, if we take the word embrekton, this translates as literally dipped piece of food. The phrase that will be translated in Google Translate will be dipped piece of food. This is likely to result in a Latin translation which is also very long, and when embrekton is compared to this long Latin translation, it will have a very large Damerau-Levenshtein distance. When these outliers are removed, we see the results that are presented on the screen now. We have a mean Damerau-Levenshtein distance of 3.4 with a median of 4. As we can see, 5% of the words are spelt the same. 7% require one Damerau-Levenshtein distance edit, while approximately 14% of the available Gaulish words require a Damerau-Levenshtein distance of 2 in order to be translated into their best available Latin translation. Overall, what do these results mean? Unfortunately, it is not immediately clear how these results should actually be interpreted. If we consider that words are similar if they have a Damerau-Levenshtein distance of 2 or less, we find that approximately 75% of the available Gaulish words are not similarly spelled to their Latin translation. So what is an outcome that we may actually draw from this process? Well, although Latin and Gaulish words may be linguistically similar, with similar root or core components of many words, the modern-day Latin alphabet spelling for many words in the two languages are probably not that similar. However, of course, it is very important to take these results with a grain of salt. Let's now talk about some of the limitations of this analysis. The first is that of the Damerau-Levenshtein distance. Words which have a long spelling but are more linguistically similar, such as the translations of the English word tenth, can have a longer Damerau-Levenshtein distance than shorter words which are actually very different. For example, if we consider the English word on, this translates to Gaulish as ar and Latin as in. When we look at ar and in, This only has a Damerau-Levenshtein distance of 3, but we can clearly see that there is no similarity in the spelling at all, compared to the Gaulish and Latin translations for the English word 10. The Damerau-Levenshtein distance is bigger, however, but they are linguistically similar, having the base des. The approach that has been taken in this analysis is of course quite limited. We should now discuss how a better approach may actually take place. The Latin words obtained in this analysis are done through 2 translations, first from the Gaulish to English through the available sources that I have, and then from English to Latin. It is clearly better to use a list of direct translations that go directly from Gaulish to Latin. Secondly, it is obviously better to consider words in their actual context. For example, if we take the Gaulish word art, which translates to bear in English, does this refer to animal or possession of an object? What is therefore the correct Latin word to use? Remember that in this study I have excluded context from analysis. If somebody does actually know of a list which can provide this information, please post a link in the comments and I will try to redo a more accurate analysis so therefore we may better understand the similarity of spelling between Latin and Gaulish. Lastly, it is important to remember that spelling does not necessarily reflect the way in which words are spoken. So although Gaulish and Latin may have dissimilar spelling, they may have similar pronunciation between the words that are being considered. Presented here is a short list of the resources which I have used to make this video. As mentioned, I obviously understand that this is not a perfect way to analyze the similarity of spelling between Gaulish and Latin words, but I thought it may be interesting to make this video to see what other people may be able to provide.